The Legacy Files with Grant Cameron.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and I'm doing a live show here, or not a show. It's not AI. Some people don't like AI. That's too bad. That's a new world. But we're going to do three episodes here, and they'll be playing as we go down the road on the Legacy Files. And I'm here with my co-author, co-assistant, Desta Barnaby over in the East, and she's renovating the house, but today's kind of a quiet day. So we're going to talk. I'm talking from the underground at the Poco Palace in Port Coquitlam, BC, where I now have spent a year. It's been a year and a couple of days that I've been here.
Mm,
And back home, I was looking, it was like 30 below the other night, and here it's warm, but it's raining. So
mm.
we're going to talk here. First of all, Desta had a couple subjects to talk about, and we're going to talk about psychedelics, which both of us have looked at and tried to figure out over the last couple of years. So welcome, Desta, and let's get going. What do you want to know about psychedelics? Maybe we should maybe go over our personal experience. We've written a book called the Psilocybin School, which details the first 15, I think you edited the book, 15 experiences that I had. I did a total of 27, and these are called high dose sessions. And the high dose is to what they call a breakthrough dose. So what you want is you don't want to just have a good time. You want to actually
Mm.
break through where you sort of enter another realm. And so this book was done, and it had the best were the first. As I went along, it was almost like the whatever is behind the phenomena is saying, "You're here again." Like, I mean, didn't you work on the stuff we already gave you? And I had lessons. So when I went in to do the psychedelics, the psilocybin, I would say, I don't really need anything. I'm not really interested in the experience or whatever. So I just said, I want to get in the field, and the idea that everything is in the field, that we are on this side and we are blocked from seeing what's on the other side. We go through the river of forgetfulness. But if you have certain modalities, and Des and I wrote a book called Contact Modalities, which looks at 70 some odd ways to break through into this realm, into this place where all the information is. So that's why I did the high dose session, is I wanted to break through, and I wanted to get the information on the other side, which is going to be accurate. It's not going to be left brain, rational, analytical, guess, guess, guess. It's the actual information. So I went over, and it was like, okay, I'm going to school. I'm here. What do I need to learn? It's like you take the reins. And for definitely the first six episodes that I had, I knew what the lesson was almost instantly, and they would take me through a lesson about important things in the world. And the two major ones, I guess, that they gave me were compassion, which I didn't even know there was such a thing as a compassion meditation, and gratitude meditation. They took me through this gratitude thing, and they took me through it a number of times, each one. And it was not like something that they said, do this, do this, do this. It happened to you. It's just like you had no choice. You went through this thing. And then I understood what it was. But that's what I was doing, and that's all I've really done. I've looked at other ones that I want to take a look at, like DMT, 5-methoxy DMT, and then one Matt was just here with Desta. What was this? The other one that they're talking about? DMT X, is it?
Yeah, the X just means it's just like the extended session. So instead of it being a 10-minute session, it's a drip where they hold
Yeah.
you where it's a continuous DMT session where it lasts instead of 10 minutes for like 30 or 60 or 90 minutes.
And yet they haven't disclosed any of the findings that they've got yet. That was, of course, always the thing that they got through. But I don't know. Have you seen anybody that really got any sort of message? You always hear this thing where they're running into these beings. I think it's 40% of people who do the DMT run into these beings. And the beings always seem to play around, and they're thankful that you're here, but they're sort of playing around. And people, I often hear the story, they really don't know what's going on. They're showing them this, they show them that. It's almost like my little grandson. As soon as I come upstairs, he gets all excited. He pulls the big bear out, and he pulls all his toys out, and he's this, and he runs to this and this, and he's running to these different things, but he's not really doing any. He does everything for like 10 seconds and off to the next thing, just like he's showing off his toys. And these beings seem to do the same sort of thing where they show you this and that, and people don't even know what the hell they're showing them. There's all these weird new inventions and things that are operating and stuff like that. So, did you find that in terms of the experience in the DMT experience from the reports that you've seen?
Well, I know that Terence McKenna was saying he was always using the phrase like or the term like Fabergé eggs. That was the thing that they were always showing him. It was like that was like something similar to what he was seeing, right? Something like really, really intricate, moving and alive. And yeah, I don't know if that anyone. I watch a lot of the Andrew Gallimore and like
Yeah.
all the new people that are talking about this. I watch almost all those podcasts. I don't know if they, I like the part of the Rick Strassman, the book where they were talking about like that the people were seeing aliens, like how many people were experiencing very similar alien
Mhm.
abductions, or similar experiences that alien abductees were reporting. Is just that it's still like the Greys and the Mantis being that were coming and doing experiments, and they were in the room that looked like a ship and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I guess the question still is, for me, anyways, the machine elves are like the most fascinating part of the whole thing. I've never personally seen them. I've never done DMT, but all the different beings that you see just doing other like psilocybin or other psychedelics is I still see different kind of beings, and it's still like the question is, what is that thing? What is the phenomena? And is it just showing you something that is familiar to you, something that is interesting to you, or like you're saying, scary? I know you had a couple of really scary trips, and are they doing that for the lesson? Like you're saying, you used it as a schoolroom experience so you could get different lessons. And are the beings that are there, is that actually what they look like? Or are they just, mirroring themselves over what's in your brain and what they think that you are going to believe? Like what's a believable mask that they can put on to show themselves to you to actually communicate with you? Or do what they look like is so insane that we would not even recognize it or not be able to see them like in their true form kind of thing? Or are they just like an orb or a ball of light? Or do they actually have some kind of physicality to them?
Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, we've written about the reflective aspect.
Yeah.
And if I were to guess, I'd say yeah, because I heard this thing about the machine elves that Terence McKenna was maybe the only one that saw the machine elves. He gave them that thing, and then other people described different types of beings. And I don't know if did you see the presentation they did on the Greys with the abductions? And I've got
Yeah.
one from Terry Tabando showed me video or drawings that he had done of his Grey that he saw, and he said in 1956. So that would have been before Betty, 5 years before Betty and Barney
Mm,
Hill. But his have bright blue eyes. And
mm,
then so I do this presentation where I show the grays. So I do a PowerPoint. So I got Whitley Strieber's gray, and then I put Betty Hill's gray beside it. And I said, "Do you think these look the same?" No, they're not even close. And then I put Betty Andreasen's gray. Then I put this gray, and then, these are ones that people drew, not just sort of like they pulled out of a book or
right.
whatever. And none of them are the same. And this
Hmm.
comes down to this whole thing where um, Jim Lukatsky said, the guy that ran the OSAP program for the DIA, said they had 250,000 reports in the database, and it was like driving a car down a freeway. All the cars were different. And that's
Right.
this whole idea that people have the almost like a zeitgeist or the egregore of what they have come to believe. And then that's how they interpret what they're seeing in terms of, and that's we brought this up, and I did some AI ones where they explained it really well. Was this whole thing of reflection where Whitley Strieber, he has a very traumatic experience, but then you look at his background and he's been writing horror novels, very
Mm,
famous horror novels, made a lot of money from it. And then you get Chris Bledsoe, who's a deacon in the church, and his is scary, but it ends up involving like this angelic figure that's giving them this message to save the earth and all this kind of stuff. And so I think there's a lot of things in this reflective nature of what you're actually seeing. And I've actually even changed, like we have in the book, I have these, you mentioned I had maybe five bad experiences, but they weren't, the whole experience was bad. It was just one period of the experience, which was very negative. And then when I did the surrender thing, that's why I put in the beginning of the book, surrender is the rule. Believe me, surrender is the only rule. Because as soon
Right.
as I surrendered, as soon as I just gave up and said, okay, I've had it, like whatever's going to happen is going to happen, then it sort of went away. And then the next experience, I would go in and I'd say, okay, they're not going to fool me this time. I know what's going on here. As soon as this, whatever happens, I'm going to just say, uh, I surrender. And they make you forget and they make you think that it's
Mm,
going to last forever. And that's where you see it in this whole thing. The whole time gets all messed around in here as well, how long this is going on. And I've sort of changed the opinion. I thought it was, well, it did have to do with I changed the mushrooms to these, what they call penis envy mushrooms, which are
mm,
apparently some of the highest potency things. And every time I went, I used those. I would have this bad sort of session in there. But I think a lot of it had to do with fear. If you go in with fear,
mm,
then you project this kind of stuff and you sort of bring it on. And then you
absolutely.
surrender and then you go into the light. But I thought it was the fact that they were teaching me the surrender rule, which is maybe part of what it was as well. But I think because you hear a lot of people will say, no, I've never had any bad experiences. And the question is, why does one person have a bad experience? Why does one person have a good experience? And I think it has to do with fear. You see that with the grays where certain percentage of people think the grays are okay. They're doing their thing. And then some people think there was the worst experience of their life. And then you start asking them what it was, and they start talking about, oh, it scared me and all this kind of stuff. And wasn't really doing anything. It was just doing its thing. And because you didn't expect this, or you didn't want to have some tall mantid in your room or whatever, and I always point out the fact that when you get the grays, I still maintain because Terry Tabando's was a gray, but it wasn't the same type of gray. But we did the books for Nancy Tremaine, 61. But before Nancy, there was really no grays. There was just this reflective quality where they would bring up Villas Boas. No, they said Villas Boas was abducted. Well, no, he wasn't abducted. He was invited into the craft and he had sex with this woman, but he described fluorescent lights inside the craft and he described
Mm,
square lights inside the craft. And you can see from that for sure that's reflective. I mean, there was, everybody else now is describing lights that don't come from anywhere. They can't figure out where the light's coming from, and it's very bright and this sort of stuff.
hmm.
And so I think a lot of this is reflective nature of what it is, and then the different types of um, compounds, which always sort of mystified me where they come from. Like, well, why would nature create this? Because the mushrooms
Yeah.
seem to be the oldest, and then you have now everybody's getting these new types of. Once it became popular, everybody started to synthesize this stuff and change it by one molecule or something so
Mm,
they could patent it. And everybody's trying to get a control of the patents. But what
hmm.
you see, I think, is that almost every structure gives you a different experience. So if you have mushrooms, you get one experience. LSD, you have a different experience. Yeah, and it's almost like you're not on levels because there's no levels. It's just water. It's like you're in the water and you're at the bottom of the ocean and it's all dark. And then you start to go up. As soon as you take a compound, it allows you to sort of break the veil and you start floating up in the water and you start seeing fish and then you start seeing more fish and you
Mm,
higher different fish. And as you get closer to the light, you start to see
mm.
more. And I think that's what this experience is. And that it may be, I'm not sure if this is the book that's coming up, but I talk about vibration, this whole thing where basically it is all going to be vibration. There is nothing but vibration. There is the quantum field, and once it starts to vibrate, it's almost like that's when the Maya begins, the illusion begins, that
Mm.
there's this vibration. And that's one thing I noticed. And I don't know if you did a lot with um, um, marijuana and stuff like that. And did you ever have this experience? Because I would read this and then I would say, yeah, that's absolutely right. Where the people would say, my body started to vibrate and it was just
Mm.
violently vibrating. And I know that for a fact because you're sitting there waiting for the psilocybin to take effect. And if you eat, sometimes it takes 45 minutes if you eat before. But if you don't eat, if you have an empty stomach, then you have this sort of, you feel like you're going to throw up, but you usually can control it. You don't throw up and it starts almost very instantly, but the body does absolutely vibrate. There's no
Hmm.
doubt about that. And it's almost like your vibration is changing. You're starting to float
Yeah.
higher into the water. Your vibration changes, and every level, every sort of as you go higher and higher, you'll see different types of events. And the final one is the one that I actually got an offer to do it in Denver, but now I didn't travel down I was going to do the ship thing and I didn't do it, so I didn't go down there. But basically, it was the 5-methoxy DMT, where you basically go back to source. And so, of course, I look at this whole thing, the idea of the vibration, and say, was it quiet? Was it still?
Mm,
And people will describe, yes, it was quiet. It was still, like there was no vibration. There was just this light. There was no
mm,
form to anything. And it's just this unconditional love in this white light and nothing else. And that sort of gives me more my version of what reality is that
mm,
reality is just a field. And we just put out I just put out a podcast where I talk about the fields. And so I ask AI, and I went to a bunch of AI things and say, what is primary? Is matter primary or is the
mm,
field primary? And they all say the field is primary. That's now been determined. So
mm,
the material, the fields, and there's 17 different fields that they know of, these fields that will produce electrons and protons and quarks and stuff like that, these 18 fields, but they're all linked together, these fields. So where do the fields come from? And the fields will produce the um, electrons and protons, but even they're not material, they're not objects. They're just like waves in the ocean. They're just excitations in a part of the field. And so there really isn't the physical world disappears. And that's where I think we start to learn when you do these different types of compounds, what the world may actually be composed of. And that comes down to this whole thing about Jim Semivan saying this whole thing is he was told was indigestible. That you
mm,
just can't drop this stuff on people because you start talking to people right now. You and I can take this stuff and we can go into the UFO world and they will it's indigestible to them. And
mm,
these are people that are on the leading edge of thought. And if
mhm,
they can't digest it, how are you going to give it to the people who don't even know about UFOs? They have no
mm,
concept. And say, there's no matter. It's all excitations in a field. The earth you're standing on is all space. You're all space. You're not touching the earth. You're actually levitating above the earth because the electrons never touch. So
mm.
there's this force between that keeps you actually off the earth. You're not even touching the earth. And people will go, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy?" So I just find it fascinating that we learn these kind of things, and the world just sort of fades away into a totally different world
Yeah.
than what the average person thinks it is actually going on. And I think you had that experience with when you read the book. Talk about you read the book, The Holographic Universe, how that sort of set you off.
Yeah. Well, like set me off as in my newly developed panic attacks after I read that book. Um, I can't even think of what year it was, but it was like maybe 2002 or something like that. And yeah, I read the book, and when they started when I was really starting to understand, I'd heard about the double slit experiment, and it just wasn't the way that Michael Talbot explained it in the book, which was the waves and the particles. So it's
Yeah.
like, so one of the pictures I think in the book is like a tree and a house or something like that, but it's all like wavy, right? So it's not if there's no like observer, like a person to look at what reality is, and then to collapse the wave function that changes the wave into a particle. And that's when you actually see a particle, which is matter. So that you only can see, and everything looks like it's matter and it's solid because you're the observer that's collapsing that wave function. So it's not a wave anymore, it's a particle then. And but I never thought, I knew all the words, but I never knew that's what it meant, because I always thought, well, what does reality look like when you're not looking at it then? And I know what they say, it's a bunch of waves, but I never thought that it was like as in a tree, but instead of it looking like a solid tree, it was like a wavy tree, like pixelated, like a pixelated tree, right? And so I used to go to sleep and in this old house I used to live in, and the way I went to sleep was looking out the window, and I would like close my eyes so the room was pitch black, but if there was ever like a moon or whatever, I could kind of see the trees and stuff outside, and I would just think like close my eyes, and then like so those trees all disappear into this like wavy thing, and I'd like open my eyes and like keep closing my eyes, opening my eyes, like trying to catch it, and just going like, what is the world, like what is happening when we're all asleep, like in the middle of the night? And same thing like with when you put your foot on the floor in the morning, how like you're saying your foot is not actually touching the floor. It feels like it because we're conditioned to believe that's how reality is, where my foot is a piece of matter and the floor is a piece of matter and your foot is laying on the floor, but there's so much space in between. So when I was doing that and waking up in the middle of the night, going to the bathroom in the pitch black and wondering what was behind the pitch black, knowing that it was all wavy, I started, yeah, I think it was like a 2002-ish or whatever, but I started having anxiety attacks and I'd never even had that before. But I started thinking, I went to Portugal for a trip, like my vacation for the year for 3 weeks. And I read that book, The Holographic Universe, like 5 times. I just like, I wanted to memorize it. That was like my job or whatever for my 3 week holiday. And I just read it over and over and over and over. So by the time I came back, oh my gosh. These cats are going crazy. By the time I came back, I was like totally freaked myself out, and I couldn't like figure out what reality, really was or whatever. So that should have to do with the trip, but definitely just what reality is. And when you really think about what it is, it's really hard to go back to your normal life. And that's the same. I was going to say to everything that you were just saying about vibrations and stuff. It's funny that the trips start with your particles of your being vibrating kind of. I had a trip once where I was I was, I don't know, for some reason I was standing in my kitchen, like the image that I was getting was myself standing in the kitchen and like falling to the ground of my kitchen. And as I was falling, my entire body broke apart into like a million or a zillion marbles. And every marble, it's kind of like the holographic universe, where every marble, if you shone a laser through it, would be a full, hologram of Desta. But so everyone was kind of a different color, like one of my head or one of my shirt or whatever. But I just was looking at myself in this trip lying on the ground, but I wasn't myself anymore. I was a zillion different marbles, and just thinking like, what is like what it is that every one of these things, every one of my bits of million bits of marble body lying on the floor, if you vibrate that at whatever like the vibration of the earth is, I don't know if that was like the Schumann resonance, if that was what the gist was trying to get to, but then it reanimates me into my actual body.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, so no matter where you're going, you are just a million particles, and it's only being held together, and all my bits are being held together because of, the gravity of the world or whatever, but it's the vibration of each of those that makes us our own unique individual like person or something. It was all about vibration, but it was also about every little part of you is like a tiny bit of a hologram of the bigger part of you, like the microcosmos into the macrocosmos kind of thing, right? So it was like it was all those kind of trips. Like when I go in to an experience like that and I have a question or I'm like contemplating something, then for me personally, my trip usually completely turns out to be like the whole understanding or whatever of that topic. So then I get obsessed with that topic and then I can try and channel it at night or keep asking questions or keep doing meditations for like a month after, trying to still figure out whatever I got from the original experience, like the original trip, and trying to hang on to that feeling of what you learned in the trip, but still trying to, whether you get into it, the field or whatever, through meditation or channeling or whatever, trying to pull more information and ask more questions about like that reality that I saw, because it's so convincing when you're in that space that what you're seeing is like, it's my first thing is always like, oh my God, I just figured it all out. Like, this is it. This is how the universe works. I can't believe it. This is it. And it's really hard to stay in that frame of mind
Yeah.
or whatever. So once you leave, I know you were calling me in the morning sometimes the night after your trip, and you're like, I'm trying to stay in, trying to
Yeah.
stay in the thing, to keep trying to think about it and keep trying to like extract more information and more understandings of what you just experienced. Cause it always seems like, for me anyways, I always just think, holy shit, this is it. Like we just figured it out. This is it.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to keep it. And you just try so hard to like be grasping at the big picture of the whole entire thing. But then after, a week or whatever, then it's like, you're just on to something else.
Yeah, yeah, it fades away. It's like you're going back, they put you back through the river for forgetfulness. I know, and I only realized this just recently. And after 27 experiences, I suddenly realized I never saw anybody in my experiences. Never saw a thing. I never saw like a
Oh.
little being or there was always somebody with me. But I didn't realize that till just recently that
Hmm.
like I would get an answer. I would just think something and the answer would come. And I remember the one time definitely I was dealing with a woman, the one out of
Oh, right, I remember
27.
that.
And I was just blown away by that. I just couldn't believe it. It was because it was that I don't know, it's like essence. It was just like I know for a fact I'm dealing with a lady, but I never saw anything. And you have the whole thing where you have in the near-death experience, 31% say they knew the answer to everything in the universe. 40% in the UFO community say they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And if you say that to people on the street, they go like, "Come on, give your head a shake."
Hmm.
But people will insist. I know they showed me one time something, and I don't really remember, but it was like, oh, that's how it works. It's like, sorry, that makes sense. It's so like just
Yeah.
weird that they could simply convince you. You don't have to, write a test or anything, but you knew what they were getting across, and it made total sense, and you knew it. But then they sort of make you forget it again as you're going back. And all I really
Hmm.
remember right now is a couple little things that I had, with dying, waking up in a coffin, or
Hmm.
the whole thing with um, when they were going after the ego thing and stuff like that, and the meditation, the compassion meditation. I remember one of them pretty good, and the gratitude meditation where I was always saying, "Hey, where's the gratitude guy? Where's the gratitude?" Because it's like they pour this oil over you or something, you suddenly feel totally grateful for everything. But that's kind of a weird thing. You go into this world, and a lot of them will say. I know some of the people, I can't remember his name was, they did the experiments where they're giving LSD to engineers, and they were coming up with these instantly solving problems. It had to be a problem they'd worked on for 3 months and they couldn't solve it and stuff like that. And like only maybe one didn't get it. Within seconds, they knew the answer to whatever problem there was. But he said the same thing that he would go in to these experiences and the beings would say, "Are you back again? Like, what are you doing here again? You don't have to be here." And it's sort of like we start doing it a little bit for entertainment, where
Hmm.
it's not so much to learn anything. That was the original purpose. And so the last ones I had were, these sort of frightening ones. And I think I've mentioned them before. The one where I'm there, and it's one of these things where the fear is just overwhelming, and it's suddenly like there's somebody down below me on the left-hand side, and I didn't see anybody, but I just instinctively knew it was an army guy who was on a computer and was watching me, and I went, "Did you crack reality?" I just sort of said that, and boom, he disappeared instantly, and that scared me. It was sort of like so I remember I went to um, Margie, and I said, "Can you ask the guides? Can you get control of the universe? Can you figure it out and then manipulate the whole universe where they can come in and do whatever they want and they control everything? And because if there's laws, I mean, if they learn the laws, then they can bypass the laws." And then they said, "No, no, it was the same sort of thing as Bashar. You create your reality. That this is not how it works." And but then the next time I did it, it was even worse. It was like this is where there's a bunch of guys, and again, they seemed like military guys, and they were on the right, even with me on the right. And I couldn't see it, but I just knew there was guys there, and I was actually asking them this: Are you controlling this thing?" And it was almost like they were giving me sort of the idea that once you go in the field, you light up, and if you're like the
Hmm.
CIA or something like that, you can get in that field and you can pick up people when they light up, and you can interact with them. You can't interact with them like when you're not stoned, but when you light up, and that was giving the idea that because I was lighting up, that's how they could interact with me. I was interacting, and that's when the one guy said, "We've decided to take your piece off the board to make the game more exciting." And it was like, "You what?" So it was like, and after that, it was like almost every session I ever did. I always said, never again, never doing this again. And then within, I'd say, I'll try it one more time. And I would somehow walk my way. Even I was thinking about it now. It was like, maybe I should go back and see what happens. And it was like that sort of thing where you can't sort of put it down. But some of them were pretty scary, and it's so convincing where they can sort of make you think it's going to last forever. And that's where they always talk about this thing where It crossover with lucid dreaming with the guy from Stanford. I can't remember his name was. Um, he would talk about this thing where when you encounter a being in the field, and it's hard to remember to actually do this, and this idea that you are creating, this is
Mm,
your shadow figure or whatever. You've created this. There's nothing happening. You're the one that's creating this experience. And so when this being comes and it's sort of an evil alien or whatever, and the idea was what you do is you treat it with unconditional love. You go give it a big hug and a kiss, and the thing will turn into a positive being, give you a positive message.
hmm.
And that's hard to do when you're in it because you sort of panic right away.
Yeah.
And but there's this idea that people I don't think really can accept is this idea that where it's almost like the idea of breaking down the quantum wave. Which takes you very hard to do in the physical world. It happens very slowly. But in this world, in like the lucid dream thing or the psychedelic experience, you can manifest instantaneously. Or in the out of body experience, it's that crossover thing where
Hmm.
what you think is exactly what happens. So if you get that Ingrid Honkala, the PhD person who's oceanographer, where she had the experience at two, whatever, when she died, she talked about this thing that you hear often with the UFO people is she said, "Oh, my mother," and suddenly she's over top of her mother and the housekeeper, and then she sees this tree or sees this dog and says, "Oh, I love dogs," and she's instantly out with the dog,
Yeah.
and then she looks at the tree and she's suddenly instantly with the tree. This idea that you can instantly go anywhere you want in the universe, that everything is controlled by you, and there is no time and no space and stuff like that, and that's I think where this indigestible thing comes from. So that's the book I want to try to write is what is the indigestible
Mm,
stuff that's throwing off the intelligence agency from putting this stuff out. They know
hmm.
they've researched this probably since the 1940s, and they've worked on all this kind of stuff. And you find out even things last night. I got obsessed like you. I got obsessed. I'm going to do maybe two podcasts with the AI on monarch butterflies. I've always been absolutely fascinated with monarch butterflies. This whole idea that you have four generations. Then the
Hmm.
fourth generation actually is the only one that flies back to Mexico and will land on the same damn tree as its
It's
great great
crazy.
great grandfather. And it was like, how does this work? I mean, how does this? So I was doing it, and then it looked and they tied it into MK Ultra. They tied it into the Monarch program,
Oh yeah,
and it
yeah.
was like how you break down the chrysalis where you it goes into the chrysalis like the mind, and they break it and they reform the mind, and that was the whole idea about calling it the
It's
Monarch
crazy.
program. And so you see this whole thing where the more and more you look at the program, the more you realize they did discover some stuff. But it was all this psi stuff, and
Yeah.
that sort of reinforces the fact that the whole world is this mental thing. That it's
Yeah.
not really the physical thing; it's this mental thing, and they're starting to understand this. And of course, they want to weaponize it, so you're not going to put it out there as to how much have they discovered, how much can they read people's minds and do all this kind of stuff because they're trying to make it better and better and better. And that's why they would watch experiencers and what people are doing in terms of trying to figure out, are they adding anything to what we already know?
Hmm. Exactly. I'll just say one, I don't know how long we've been doing this, but one thing that you were saying about the vibrations too is it's interesting about how that vibration is the starting point kind of any psychedelic experience, but also the vibration starts with out of body experiences, right? If you're astral traveling or doing the mind awake, body asleep, trying to get out of your body in the middle of the night, that's the first thing that you notice as well is the vibration
Okay.
coming, and the vibration is so like overwhelming or whatever that's the first thing that is, so you can imagine that that's because you're raising up, whether you're raising up out of your actual body or, it's just like the vibration and the feeling of it is like an ascending, a raising up kind of thing. But also for channeling, what they say in a lot of the messages that I get too is that, how it's working is like they're up, and it's probably not actually literally up, but they're like in another space. And they always say something like, you're raising your vibration up and we're coming down, and we're kind of like meeting
Yeah.
in the middle kind of thing. So it's like that vibration and raising, like you're saying in the water kind of thing, like how you're getting closer and closer to the light or to the source or whatever it is like, I think that's probably a good description of it, because that's what it feels like, right? You're just raising up through the etheric layers or through the your etheric body kind of thing and going closer and closer up to source, how they used to say, or to, heaven or whatever, but whether it's
Yeah.
actually up there or not. But I think that the vibration, that's exactly what it's a good metaphor kind of, because that's exactly what it feels like is always happening when you're getting your vibration up.
Yeah. And that's why each experience will be different in terms of what you're taking, is it will create a different sort of vibration. And
Hmm.
the one of the things that I found kind of, we were talking about the beings, is I asked this to um, Margie as well, the beings, and I said, like, so what do you do when you're not talking to Margie? Like, what do you guys do? It's like, so, and I always think of that when I hear about the DMTLs, like, is that all you guys do? Is sit there and wait for someone to come across, or like, what kind of life do they live, or like,
Hmm.
it's kind of weird, but that's where. I think you and I, especially me, I think that's one of the biggest things I've ever learned is this whole idea about vibration. And I started checking it with AI. I went back and I did a lot of stuff on, what's primary and this whole thing that there basically is no particles. There's just everything is a wave. It's an excitation inside a wave, which is connected to this wave, and you can't separate the waves. And then I ask, of course, I ask, oh, what's the quantum field? What's the bottom field? And then I was even reading this morning that not Niels Bohr, David Bohm had actually
Hmm.
said this thing where he believed that there was this intricate order behind that, that even behind the field, there's an order that's giving the rules to the field as to what to do. Because it always
Mm.
comes down to who's the originator, like where the
Yeah.
fields come from, who made the
Yeah.
fields.
Yeah.
And this idea, and he said, well, when you get to the quantum realm, all figured out, there's just another level below that. And everybody said, no, 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 there. And he said, yeah, there is. And so the whole idea is that when you start looking at the world with the vibrations, that everything is a vibration, and that there may be fields below the quantum field, you start realizing that we have, as they told me in my experience, at least 5 times they told me, you think you know everything, you haven't got an effing
Yeah.
clue what's going on. And they were very insistent about this. And that's when I
Yeah.
said at the one point, I was upset. I said, I didn't come here to be abused by you. Like I can accept that I've got an ego, that's fine. But I'm here just to learn stuff. Like, okay, so you tell me what the hell's going on. And then this voice or something says, we don't know either. And I go, oh, come on, man. We don't know either.
That's exactly it. Yeah, there's lots of stories of that being it. You can never find the top, oops. You can never find the like top or like source, right? You can never get to source. Even
Yeah.
in science fiction movies about like, those kind of aliens and stuff. It's like there's always something one layer behind it. It's like, what is that? That's the big thing. What is source? What's behind
Yeah.
all of it?
Even the aliens, because remember they had that the group in Montreal. It was I don't know if the guy's still alive, but it was like a cult, a UFO cult. And they
Oh
believed
yeah.
that whole thing that
Oh
that that,
yeah.
that they had created the universe, they created the universe, but it was like, well, who the aliens had created everything. Well, who created the aliens? It was always
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
idea that, and
Yeah.
that's what Hoffman said. I was just watching Hoffman again the other night to tie his stuff into this. And Hoffman basically says, the vast majority of the high energy physicists believe time space is dead, and that there is, when you go there, there's really nothing there. Time space is a creation of the field, and that when you get behind there, we have no clue. You're never going to be able to
Hmm.
know what reality is because you're always
Mm.
looking at it through a filter,
Yeah.
through a symbol or an icon or whatever,
Yeah.
and you can never see it. And that's
Yeah.
that's where that's why I'm just guessing because Semivan hasn't really um, spelled out what he means by this indigestible, except the fact that that people can't read, only half the population can read at a grade 6 level and stuff like that, that people really aren't all that clued into what's going on, and that you
Mm.
just can't drop this stuff on them. But he doesn't really define what the stuff is in
Mm.
terms, and I think it's got to be that idea that your whole worldview is just going to collapse. Like when you read the holographic universe, you can just imagine somebody who's, very, very, atheistic or very religious and in the Bible Belt or something like that, and then you throw this stuff at them, and they suddenly realize that everything they learned was wrong, and the world just sort of collapses under them, where there's everything is space, and it's all just
Mm.
waves, and even this idea of a couple weeks ago, I was looking at this thing about sound, the big story about when a tree falls in the forest. Does it make
Yeah.
a sound? Well, no, it can't make a sound. What it makes is a wave that say if you're near it, you will pick up the wave of the air going past your skin. And if you've got ears, you will hear the sound, but there is no sound. There is
Hmm.
no such thing as sound. Sound is created by the ear. It's a
Yeah.
creation of the ear,
Yeah.
and there is no sound.
Yeah.
It's just everything's just a wave. And
I
we
know.
got this idea that there's color and there's sound and there's all this kind of stuff. And all that stuff disappears. It all just crashes when you start to look at how the world is actually constructed. And I think that's what you and I are at. But as I said, I mean, this one comment was, I've lost the plot. But as I think, the more I look at it, the more I see the UFO community has absolutely lost the plot. They're just back
Yeah.
with, who's the latest whistleblower and who's got the aliens and what do the aliens look like and all this kind of stuff. And it's just so far beyond that in terms of what's actually going on and what's important. Where you and I and maybe one or two other people are actually on this road of digging down and trying to find out what's really behind the all this stuff. What's
Mhm.
the original source of all this stuff and getting as close to it as we possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's the funnest part of the whole entire thing because it's the biggest mystery. It's like the top mystery. You can't get more mysterious than what's behind it
Yeah.
all.
And when you figure out something, you get excited. Because when I had this thing about the sound, I went, "Oh, I never realized that." It was like, "Holy cow, that's pretty cool!" And it's like almost like Christmas was like almost like a gift when I suddenly realized that reality that there is no sound. It's sound is created by the ear. It's and it creates something. It may each like an ant will get different sound. It will hear it different. And if it doesn't have ears, if you don't have ears, you can't hear. If you're deaf, you can't
Mm,
hear. Good, and there's no sound. It's not out there, and that's what Semivan said, which again hints at it. He says there does not appear to be any there.
mm,
And so I say to the UFO community, this guy's got the 7 hour briefing from the intelligence people who are very high level guys that ran the programs and stuff like that. And he's a high level CIA guy. So what the hell is he talking about when he says there does not appear to be any there?
hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
So we'll leave it at
All right.
that and let's go to the aliens. We're going to do a session on the aliens now, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
All right. Thanks, Grant.
Thanks.